A mother and her disabled daughter, dressed in the simplest of clothes, walked into a world of polished marble and hushed whispers. A restaurant where a single meal cost more than most people's monthly rent. They were immediately met with a sneer from a waitress who saw only worn-out shoes and a faded cardigan. Not the quiet dignity of a woman who could buy the entire city block. The waitress, blinded by her own judgment, made a cruel, public spectacle of them, trying to shame them into leaving. She had no idea that her every condescending word, her every dismissive gesture, was being observed by the one person who held her entire future in the palm of her hand. What happened next would not only shatter her arrogant world, but would also change the lives of everyone in that restaurant forever. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The city's most exclusive restaurant, the Gilded Spoon, was a symphony of quiet opulence, a place where moneyed whispers mingled with the gentle clinking of silver on porcelain. Sunlight, filtered through crystalline windows, danced across tables draped in heavy white linen, illuminating the hushed, reverent atmosphere. Into this curated world of wealth and power stepped Amelia, a woman whose simple gray cardigan and soft worn jeans were a stark dissonance against the backdrop of tailored suits and designer dresses. Her hand rested gently on the back of her daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed 10-year-old in a simple pink t-shirt, who moved with the aid of ornate silver leg braces that shone with a brilliance that seemed to mock the restaurant's understated luxury. They were not there for the food, not really. They were there for a memory, a ghost of a happier time when Lily's father had celebrated a long-forgotten success at this very establishment. Amelia held the memory close, a fragile warmth against the creeping chill of the restaurant's judging eyes. Her gaze swept across the room, noting the subtle, yet instantaneous, shifts in posture from the other patrons. A dismissive glance here, a wrinkled nose there. It was a language she understood all too well. She had built an empire from the ground up, a global technology firm that had reshaped the very fabric of modern communication. Yet she had never forgotten the sting of being judged by her cover. In fact, she often invited it, using it as a silent litmus test of character. Today, however, her focus was on her daughter, on recreating a sliver of joy from a life that had been unfairly altered. Celeste, a waitress whose perfectly coiffed hair and pencil-thin skirt seemed to be her primary qualifications, saw them immediately. She moved towards them, her steps a practiced, predatory glide. Her smile, however, did not reach her eyes. It was a cold, sharp thing, a weapon she wielded with practiced ease against those she deemed unworthy. "Are you lost? Are you lost? Are you lost?" she asked, her voice a saccharine melody laced with arsenic. The question hung in the air, a deliberate and public challenge to their presence. Amelia met her gaze, her own expression calm and unreadable. "No," she replied, her voice soft but firm, a quiet stone in a babbling brook of condescension. "We have a reservation." Celeste's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched in feigned surprise. She made a show of consulting her tablet, her fingers tapping dramatically on the screen. "I don't seem to have a reservation under—" "Well, under what name would it be?" The implication was clear. "People like you do not make reservations here." Amelia felt a familiar weariness settle upon her, but she pushed it aside, her focus remaining squarely on Lily, who was now looking at the grand dessert cart with wide, innocent eyes. From across the room, another waitress, Chloe, watched the exchange with a growing sense of unease. Chloe was new, still learning the intricate dance of high-end service, but she knew unkindness when she saw it. She saw the mother's simple clothes, but she also saw the fierce, protective love in her eyes and the quiet strength in her posture. She saw the daughter's braces, but she also saw the unbridled joy on her face as she looked at the towering chocolate cake. Chloe's heart went out to them, a small, silent act of solidarity in a room filled with cold indifference. She began to busy herself at a nearby station, her movements a little too deliberate, her presence a quiet shield she hoped the mother might feel. Celeste's lips curled into a smirk, a triumphant little twitch that betrayed her satisfaction. "I'm sorry," she said, the words dripping with insincerity. "But there is no reservation under that name." Perhaps you're mistaken about the restaurant? She gestured vaguely towards the door. A silent, dismissive flick of her wrist. The message was unmistakable. Leave. Amelia did not move. She simply stood there, a bastion of tranquility in the face of Celeste's storm of arrogance. I can assure you we are in the right place, Amelia said, her voice maintaining its steady, even keel. Perhaps you could check again. The reservation was made several months ago. The very idea that someone in such attire would plan a visit so far in advance was, in Celeste's mind, utterly preposterous. She scoffed, a small, sharp sound that drew the attention of a nearby table. Several months? She repeated, her voice now louder, deliberately drawing an audience. This is the Gilded Spoon, not a community diner. People don't just wander in. The public humiliation had begun, a slow, deliberate peeling away of dignity. Amelia felt Lily's small hand tighten in hers. She looked down and gave her daughter a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that everything would be all right. She would not allow this woman's prejudice to tarnish this day, this memory. She had faced down hostile corporate boards and ruthless competitors. She would not be intimidated by a waitress with an inflated sense of self-importance. Chloe, from her vantage point, felt a hot flush of anger rise in her cheeks. She wanted to intervene, to say something, but she was new, powerless. The manager, a stern man named Mr. Abernathy, valued decorum above all else. A public confrontation would likely cost her the job she desperately needed, and so she watched, her heart aching for the quiet woman and her daughter. Her fists clenched at her sides. She made a decision. She would find a way to help, a small gesture of defiance against Celeste's cruelty. While Celeste continued her performance, Chloe discreetly filled 2 glasses with iced water, adding a slice of lemon to each, and placed them on a small tray. It was a simple act, but in the rigid etiquette of the Gilded Spoon, it was a breach of protocol. Water was only to be served after a party was seated. Celeste noticed the movement out of the corner of her eye. She shot Chloe a look of pure venom, a silent threat that promised retribution later. But Chloe did not falter. She approached Amelia and Lily, her own smile genuine and warm, a stark contrast to Celeste's icy facade. "Hello," she said softly, ignoring Celeste completely. "It can get a little warm in here. I thought you might like some water while you wait." Amelia looked at the young waitress, at the honest kindness in her eyes, and felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with a gratitude that went far beyond the simple offering of water. "That is very thoughtful of you." Lily beamed up at Chloe, a radiant, gap-toothed smile that seemed to momentarily brighten the entire restaurant. "Thank you," she chirped. The interaction, this small island of humanity, only seemed to fuel Celeste's ire. The fact that this new, insignificant waitress had dared to undermine her authority was an unforgivable offense. Her voice took on an even sharper edge. "As I was saying," she snapped, turning her full attention back to Amelia, "we are fully booked. There are no tables available. You will have to leave." Her words were now a command, not a suggestion. She placed her hands on her hips, a posture of belligerent authority, a gatekeeper standing firm at the gilded gates. The air crackled with tension. The quiet hum of the restaurant had subsided as more patrons turned to watch the unfolding drama. It was exactly the kind of scene Mr. Abernathy abhorred, but Celeste was too caught up in her power play to care. She was making an example of these interlopers, reinforcing the unwritten rules of this exclusive world. Amelia drew a slow, steadying breath. Her calmness, a stark counterpoint to Celeste's agitated superiority. She had hoped to avoid this, to simply have a quiet meal and leave, but it was clear that would not be possible. Celeste was not merely doing her job, she was reveling in her perceived power, deriving a cruel pleasure from this public display of exclusion. "I understand you believe you are doing your job," Amelia began, her tone measured and devoid of anger. "But I must insist you check one more time. The reservation is under the name Blackwood, Amelia Blackwood." The name fell into the charged silence with a quiet weight, yet it meant nothing to Celeste. To her it was just another common name attached to a common-looking woman. Her sneer deepened. "Blackwood," she repeated, tasting the name with theatrical disdain. "No, I'm quite certain. I would remember a name like that if it were on our esteemed guest list." She tapped her foot impatiently, the sound a sharp, irritating metronome marking the time Amelia was wasting. "Now, if you'll please excuse me, I have actual patrons to attend to, people who belong here." The insult was direct, a poisoned dart aimed at the heart. Lily, who had been trying to follow the conversation, now understood the core of it. She understood that this mean lady did not want them there. Her bright smile faltered, her lower lip beginning to tremble. She pressed closer to her mother, her small body seeking refuge from the coldness of the room. Amelia wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. The sight of Lily's distress was the one thing that could pierce her armor of composure. A flicker of something hard and unyielding entered her eyes. This was no longer just about a rude waitress. It was about protecting her child from the casual cruelty of the world. She would not allow this woman to make her daughter feel small, to make her feel unworthy. Chloe, witnessing the little girl's reaction, felt her own resolve harden. Protocol be damned. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly between Celeste and the family. "Celeste, perhaps I could help," she offered, her voice polite but firm. "I can double-check the system. Sometimes the digital reservation book can be a bit slow to update." It was a lifeline, a diplomatic exit from the escalating confrontation. Celeste, however, saw it as another act of insubordination. She whirled on Chloe, her eyes blazing with fury. "You will do no such thing," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "You will go back to polishing silverware and stay out of matters that do not concern you, you little charity case. Your job is hanging by a thread as it is." The cruelty directed at Chloe was just as sharp, just as public. She wanted to humiliate not just the unwanted guests, but also the one person who had shown them kindness. Chloe flinched as if struck, her face paling. The insult had hit its mark. Chloe was indeed on a scholarship program that the restaurant offered to culinary students, a fact Celeste had lorded over her since her first day. The other staff members who overheard the exchange looked away, their discomfort palpable, but their silence a form of complicity. They all knew Celeste's temper and her favored status with Mr. Abernathy, who valued her ruthless efficiency. No one dared to cross her. The scene was now set. The antagonist had revealed the depths of her arrogance and cruelty. The humble protagonist had been publicly shamed. The kind witness had been punished for her compassion. The tension in the restaurant was thick enough to be cut with a silver butter knife. The other diners were no longer pretending not to watch. They were fully invested in the drama, their expressions a mixture of mild amusement, discomfort, and detached curiosity. They were witnessing a clash of worlds, a real-life morality play, unfolding between the lobster bisque and the filet mignon. The standoff continued, a tableau of silent, simmering conflict. Celeste, feeling she had successfully asserted her dominance over both the unwanted guests and the insolent new girl, crossed her arms, a smug finality in her posture. Amelia, however, had reached her limit. Her patience, a deep and vast ocean, had finally met its shore. The initial goal of a quiet, nostalgic meal had been irrevocably shattered by Celeste's relentless antagonism. Now, a different objective had taken its place. A lesson needed to be taught. "That's quite enough," Amelia said. Her voice was still quiet, yet it carried a new authority, a cutting edge of tempered steel that sliced through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. Every head turned towards her. Even Celeste seemed momentarily taken aback by the shift in tone. "We will not be leaving," Amelia stated, not as a request, but as a fact. "And you," she said, her gaze locking onto Celeste, "will learn a valuable lesson today about respect." Celeste let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A lesson? From you?" She scoffed, her confidence returning with a vengeance. "The only person who needs to learn a lesson here is you. You need to learn your place. This establishment is for a certain class of people, and you, madam, are clearly not it." She took a step closer, invading Amelia's personal space, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still audible to the surrounding tables. "Look at you. Your clothes are cheap, your shoes are worn, Did you really think you could just walk in here and be treated like royalty? You are an embarrassment." Each word was a calculated blow, designed to inflict maximum shame. But Amelia did not flinch. She simply absorbed the insults, her expression unreadable. Inside, however, a storm of righteous indignation was brewing. It wasn't for herself. She had long ago become immune to such superficial judgments. It was for Lily, who was now hiding her face against Amelia's side. It was for Chloe, whose eyes were now shining with unshed tears of humiliation. It was for every person who had ever been made to feel less than because of their appearance, their income, or their circumstances. This was no longer a personal slight, it was a matter of principle. "My clothes do not define my worth," Amelia said, her voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the room. "Nor do my daughter's braces define hers. What defines a person is their character, their kindness, their compassion, qualities you seem to be sorely lacking." The directness of the rebuke stunned Celeste into a momentary silence. No one had ever dared to speak to her like that. She was the gatekeeper, the arbiter of who belonged. Before she could formulate a scathing reply, a deep, authoritative voice boomed from the restaurant's entrance. "Is there a problem here?" It was Mr. Abernathy, the manager. He was a tall, imposing man in a perfectly tailored suit, his face a mask of stern professionalism. He had been alerted by the headwaiter that a scene was being caused at the front of the restaurant. His eyes swept over the situation, Celeste, rigid with fury, the poorly dressed woman and the child with leg braces, the new waitress Chloe looking distressed. His brow furrowed in disapproval. He disliked any disruption to the seamless, well-oiled machine of his restaurant. Celeste saw her chance. "Mr. Abernathy, thank goodness," she gushed, turning on a practiced air of victimhood. "I was just explaining to this woman that we are fully booked. She refuses to accept that and has been causing a most unpleasant scene. She doesn't have a reservation and is upsetting the other guests." She cast a pointed look at Amelia, fully expecting Mr. Abernathy to swiftly and efficiently remove the problem. This was how it always worked. He would handle the unpleasantness, and she would be vindicated. Mr. Abernathy's gaze fell upon Amelia and Lily. His eyes, trained to assess a patron's net worth in a single glance, registered the simple cardigan, the worn denim, and the child's medical equipment. His expression tightened. Celeste's version of events seemed entirely plausible. He valued order and the comfort of his high-paying clientele above all else, and this disruption was a clear violation of the restaurant's carefully cultivated ambiance. "Madam," he said, his voice polite but firm, carrying the unmistakable weight of final authority. "I am the manager here. If my staff informs you that we have no tables, then I am afraid we have no tables. I must ask you to please leave. You are disturbing our other diners." He gestured subtly towards the door, his movements economical and decisive. He was a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. He expected Amelia to shrink under his authoritative gaze, to gather her child and retreat in shame. He did not expect her to stand her ground. Amelia met his gaze without a trace of intimidation. She looked from the stern manager to the smirking waitress, and a profound sense of disappointment washed over her. It was a systemic problem, an arrogance that started at the top and festered downwards. Celeste was not an anomaly. She was a product of an environment that prioritized wealth and appearance over basic human decency. "Mr. Abernathy," Amelia said, her voice still calm but now imbued with a chilling seriousness. "Before I leave, would you mind telling me who the owner of this establishment is? I have a few words I would like to share with them about the quality of their management and staff." The question was a calculated chess move, and it caught Mr. Abernathy off guard. It was an unexpected challenge to his authority. "The owner is a private investor," he said stiffly. "They are not involved in the day-to-day operations. I am in charge here, and I am telling you to leave." Celeste, emboldened by the manager's support, decided to add one final, crushing blow. "She's probably going to claim she knows the owner," she sneered to Mr. Abernathy, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a classic move. They always get desperate when they're caught. Next, she'll be threatening to sue." She laughed, a short, ugly sound. Go on, she taunted Amelia directly. Tell us you're the Queen of England. We're all waiting. The humiliation was now complete. The protagonist had been thoroughly and publicly debased by both the antagonist and the authority figure. The tension was at its absolute peak. The other diners were now silent, their meals forgotten, their full attention on the drama. They were about to witness the climax, the moment the story would turn. It was at that precise moment that the main doors of the restaurant swung open again. A man in an impeccably tailored, charcoal gray suit entered, followed by two other similarly dressed individuals. He was in his late 50s, with a shock of silver hair and an air of quiet, commanding power that made Mr. Abernathy's authority seem provincial by comparison. He paused at the entrance, his sharp eyes quickly assessing the tense scene at the reception desk. Mr. Abernathy's back was to the door, and he didn't immediately notice the new arrival. Chloe, however, saw him. Her eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps awe, in her expression. The man's gaze swept the room and finally landed on Amelia. A warm smile spread across his face, a genuine expression that instantly softened his powerful demeanor. He strode forward, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He ignored the manager, he ignored the sneering waitress, and he walked directly to Amelia. "Amelia?" he said, his voice rich and warm. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The traffic was unbelievable." He then knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with Lily. "And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you. It's an honor to finally meet you." He gently shook her small hand, his smile never wavering. The vindicator had arrived. The man's arrival was like a stone dropped into a still, silent pond. The ripples of his presence expanding outwards, disrupting the established order of the room. Mr. Abernathy turned slowly, his face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into shocked recognition. His professional composure, his most prized asset, crumbled into dust. "Mr. Blackwood," he stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher than usual. I had no idea you were coming in today. We weren't expecting you." He nervously straightened his tie, a gesture of deference and sudden dawning terror. Celeste, who had been enjoying her moment of triumph, stared at the scene, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Blackwood. She had mocked the name just moments before. Amelia Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood. The connection slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen. Her smug smile froze, then collapsed into an expression of pure, unadulterated panic. The man, Mr. Blackwood, rose to his full height and turned his attention to the manager, his warm smile replaced by a look of profound disappointment. "Abernathy," he said, his voice now cold and clipped. "I come to my own restaurant to have lunch with my wife and my daughter, and I find them being harassed and publicly humiliated by your staff. Explain yourself." His wife, his daughter, the words echoed in the cavernous silence of the restaurant. Every patron was now openly staring, their forks suspended in mid-air. The drama had escalated beyond their wildest expectations. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a corporate execution in the making. Amelia Blackwood, the woman in the simple gray cardigan, was not just a guest, she was the owner. The quiet, unassuming woman they had all watched with detached pity was the matriarch of the entire Blackwood empire. A name synonymous with innovation, power, and immense, almost unimaginable, wealth. The dramatic irony that had been simmering beneath the surface had now boiled over, scalding everyone in its wake. Mr. Abernathy began to sputter, his words a jumbled mess of apologies and excuses. "Mr. Blackwood, I assure you, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. She. Celeste was merely following protocol." "Protocol?" Amelia interrupted, her voice finally losing its quiet restraint and taking on the commanding tone of a CEO addressing a failing department. "Is it your protocol to judge people based on their clothing? Is it your protocol to mock a child's disability? Is it your protocol to foster an environment of such blatant cruelty and prejudice?" She took a step forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. I have spent my life building a company founded on principles of inclusion, respect, and integrity. It seems those principles have not trickled down to this establishment." She then turned her gaze to Celeste, who looked as if she might faint. The waitress was trembling, her carefully constructed world shattered into a million pieces. The power she had wielded with such glee was an illusion, and she was now facing the terrifying reality of her actions. She had not just insulted a customer, she had insulted her employer, the very source of her livelihood and her inflated sense of importance. She opened her mouth to speak, to apologize, to beg, but no words came out. There was nothing to say. Her actions, her words, her sneers had all been laid bare for everyone to see. There was no defense, no explanation that could possibly mitigate the magnitude of her transgression. She was utterly and completely exposed. Mr. Blackwood looked at the terrified waitress, his expression one of cold, clinical assessment. He was not a man given to outbursts of anger. His displeasure was a far more chilling affair, a quiet, decisive removal of a problem. "Celeste," he said, the name sounding foreign and unimportant on his lips, "you are fired, effective immediately. Please collect your personal belongings and have security escort you from the premises." The sentence was delivered without malice, without emotion. It was a simple statement of fact, as final and irreversible as a law of physics. For Celeste, it was the end of her world. Her job at the Gilded Spoon was more than just a source of income. It was her identity. It was the source of her pride, her social standing, her sense of superiority. In a single moment, it had all been stripped away. A choked sob escaped her lips, a pathetic, wounded sound. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." Amelia stepped forward. "A mistake, Celeste?" she asked, her voice softening slightly, not with pity, but with a deep, moralistic gravity. "A mistake is forgetting to bring a side of bread. What you did was an act of deliberate cruelty. You looked at my daughter, a child, and saw her as less than human because of the braces on her legs. You looked at me and saw a target for your own insecurities. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to be unkind." Amelia then turned her attention to Mr. Abernathy, who was now sweating profusely, his face pale with dread. "And you, Mr. Abernathy?" she continued, her voice regaining its sharp executive edge. "You are the manager. The culture of any organization is a direct reflection of its leadership. You have cultivated a culture of elitism and judgment here. You empowered her behavior through your own prejudice. You are suspended, pending a full investigation into the training and service protocols of this restaurant." Mr. Abernathy's jaw dropped. A suspension was a death sentence in his line of work. His reputation, carefully built over decades, was in tatters. "Mrs. Blackwood." "One," he began, but Amelia held up a hand, silencing him. "I am not interested in your excuses," she said. "I am interested in solutions. I am interested in change." She then turned and walked over to Chloe, who had been standing by, a silent, shocked observer to the entire cataclysmic event. She took the young waitress's hands in her own. Chloe flinched, expecting a reprimand for her own breach of protocol. Instead, Amelia gave her a warm, genuine smile. "You," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "showed courage and kindness in the face of ugliness. You treated my daughter and me with respect when no one else would. You did not stand by and do nothing. That is the kind of character I value." She then looked over at her husband. "Mr. Blackwood and I believe in investing in people, people with integrity, people like you." The comeuppance was not just about punishment. It was about rebalancing the scales, about rewarding virtue as much as it was about condemning vice. The other patrons watched, utterly captivated. They had come for an expensive lunch and were instead being served a masterclass in justice and corporate ethics. The hushed whispers that had once been dismissive were now filled with awe and respect. The power dynamic of the entire room had been irrevocably and permanently altered. The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. A discreet security guard appeared and quietly escorted a weeping Celeste from the dining room, her career in high-end hospitality over. Mr. Abernathy, looking dazed and broken, retreated to his office to await his fate. The restaurant, once a bastion of rigid order, was now in a state of quiet chaos. The staff moved with a newfound uncertainty, their professional veneers cracked, their eyes darting nervously towards the Blackwood's table. Mr. W.W.W. Blackwood, now playing the part of the gracious host in his own establishment, had a quiet word with the head chef. A special table was prepared in a secluded alcove, away from the prying eyes of the other diners. He then personally escorted Amelia and Lily to their seats, his every movement a testament to his love and respect for his family. Once they were settled, Amelia turned her full attention to Chloe, who had been asked to join them. The young waitress sat perched on the edge of her seat, still overwhelmed by the whirlwind of events. "Chloe," Amelia began, her voice soft and reassuring. "I was not exaggerating when I said I value character. My husband and I have a foundation that provides scholarships for promising students in the culinary and hospitality arts. We are always looking for individuals with not just talent, but with the right heart for service. We believe you are one of those individuals." Chloe's eyes widened, tears welling up for a different reason now. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "You don't have to say anything," Mr. Blackwood interjected gently. "We would like to offer you a full scholarship to the most prestigious hospitality management school in the country. All expenses paid. We believe you have the potential to be a leader, to create the kind of welcoming and inclusive environment that every establishment should strive for." The offer was life-changing, a dream so far beyond Chloe's wildest aspirations that it felt unreal. She had grown up in a small town with very little. And this job, this scholarship program she was already in, was her one shot at a better life. To have it all threatened by Celeste's cruelty, and then to be offered this incredible opportunity, was an emotional whiplash of the highest order. "But why?" Chloe asked, the question a genuine heartfelt query. "All I did was get you some water." Amelia reached across the table and placed her hand over Chloe's. "You did so much more than that," she said earnestly. "In a moment of profound unkindness, you offered compassion. You didn't do it because you knew who I was. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That, Chloe, is everything. That is the cornerstone of true hospitality, and it is a quality that cannot be taught. It must come from within." Lily, who had been quietly eating a specially prepared bowl of ice cream, looked up at Chloe and smiled. "You were nice," she said simply, a child's pure and uncomplicated verdict. And in that moment, that was the only testimonial that mattered. The rest of their meal was a quiet affair, a gentle healing after the storm. The Blackwoods learned about Chloe's dreams, her passion for creating amazing dining experiences, and her belief that good food should be enjoyed by everyone, regardless of their station in life. They saw in her a future leader who would not repeat the mistakes of Abernathy and Celeste. They were not just giving her a scholarship. They were investing in a better future for their own business empire. The story of what happened at the Gilded Spoon that day spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. It became a cautionary tale, a modern-day parable about the dangers of judging by appearances. But for Amelia Blackwood, the event was not an ending, it was a beginning. It was a catalyst for a fundamental change that would ripple throughout her entire network of businesses. A time jump of 1 year finds the Gilded Spoon a transformed place. The heavy, intimidating atmosphere had been replaced by one of warmth and genuine welcome. The staff, all of whom had undergone a rigorous new training program, were attentive, kind, and professional. The old guard, those who had silently condoned Celeste's behavior, were gone. In their place was a new team, a diverse group of individuals hired not just for their experience, but for their empathy. And at the helm, as the new general manager, was Chloe. The past year had been a whirlwind for her. The scholarship had taken her to Switzerland, where she had excelled, soaking up every lesson with a fierce determination to prove the Blackwoods' faith in her was not misplaced. She had returned not just with a degree, but with a new vision for what hospitality could be. Under her leadership, the Gilded Spoon was more successful than ever. It was still exclusive, the prices still astronomical, but the criteria for entry had changed. The only currency that truly mattered now was mutual respect. She had instituted a new policy, a dignity for all mandate, that was displayed prominently, yet discreetly, near the entrance. She had also partnered with local charities, hosting monthly dinners for families from underprivileged backgrounds, a move that had initially scandalized the old clientele, but had ultimately earned the restaurant a new level of respect and admiration. Amelia and Lily were frequent, unannounced visitors. They would sit at a small corner table, dressed in their usual simple attire, and watch Chloe in action. They saw her greet every guest with the same warm smile, whether they arrived in a limousine or on foot. They saw her correct a new waiter with a gentle, encouraging word. They saw her kneeling down to speak to a child, just as Mr. Blackwood had once knelt to speak to Lily, and in these moments Amelia knew their investment had paid off 1,000-fold. One evening, as they were leaving, they saw a familiar face polishing silverware in the back of the house, far from the public eye. It was Celeste. Chloe had, against the advice of many, offered her a second chance. Not as a waitress, but as a kitchen porter, the lowest rung on the restaurant ladder. It was a humbling, difficult job, but Celeste had accepted it. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, weary determination. She looked up and saw Amelia. A flicker of the old fear crossed her face, but then it was replaced by something else. A resigned, almost grateful, acceptance. She gave a small, hesitant nod of acknowledgement. Amelia nodded back. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. It was a testament to the fact that people could change, that lessons, however harsh, could be learned. Redemption, Amelia knew, was a long and difficult road, but it was a road that should be open to everyone. The positive changes were not confined to the four walls of the Gilded Spoon. Inspired by the incident, Amelia launched a new philanthropic initiative through the Blackwood Foundation called the Chloe Program. It was a nationwide training and certification program for the entire hospitality industry, from five-star hotels to roadside diners. The program's curriculum was revolutionary. It went beyond the technical aspects of service, how to set a table, how to pour wine, and focused on the human element. It included mandatory modules on unconscious bias, empathy, disability awareness, and conflict de-escalation. It used virtual reality simulations to place trainees in the shoes of guests from all walks of life, forcing them to confront their own prejudices in a controlled environment. The program's motto was simple. Service is not about servitude. It is about seeing the humanity in everyone. Initially, there was resistance from the more traditional elements of the industry. They called it woke nonsense, an unnecessary and costly addition to standard training. But Amelia was relentless. She leveraged her immense influence, making certification in the Chloe program a prerequisite for any hospitality business that wanted to partner with the Blackwood Corporation. Given that her corporation was one of the largest clients for hotels, airlines, and catering services in the world, the industry had no choice but to comply. The program was a resounding success. Businesses that adopted it saw an immediate and dramatic increase in customer satisfaction scores. Employee morale improved as staff felt more empowered and respected. The Chloe program became the new gold standard, a benchmark for excellence in the service industry. Chloe herself became a prominent figure in this movement. She traveled the country as the program's lead ambassador, sharing her story with thousands of aspiring hospitality professionals. She was a living embodiment of the program's values, her journey from a timid, kind-hearted waitress to a confident, compassionate leader, an inspiration to all. She never lost her humility, her quiet grace. She would often tell the story of that fateful day, not to boast about her own success or to shame Celeste, but to illustrate a simple, powerful point. One small act of kindness can change the world, she would say, her voice filled with earnest conviction. You never know who you are serving. It might be a struggling student, a lonely senior, or the CEO of a global corporation, but it doesn't matter. They all deserve the same thing, to be treated with dignity. The story of Amelia, Lily, and Chloe became a legend. a piece of modern folklore whispered in kitchens and dining rooms across the country. It was a reminder that true power was not in wealth or status, but in character. It was a testament to the idea that a single individual, armed with nothing but their own integrity, could stand up to injustice and spark a revolution of kindness. The Gilded Spoon was no longer just a restaurant, it was a symbol of this new philosophy, a beacon of hope in an often judgmental world. The positive change had become systemic, a lasting legacy born from a moment of ugliness. Lily thrived in this new environment of acceptance. The incident at the restaurant, which could have been a traumatic memory, had been transformed into a powerful lesson about her own worth. She saw how her mother had stood up for her, not with anger, but with an unshakable, quiet strength. She saw how a single act of kindness from a stranger, from Chloe, had set in motion a tidal wave of positive change. Her leg braces, which had once been a source of self-consciousness, now felt like a part of her story, a symbol of her resilience. She became a young ambassador for children with disabilities, speaking at events hosted by the Blackwood Foundation. Her speeches were simple, direct, and profoundly moving. She didn't talk about hardship, she talked about kindness. She told the story of the mean waitress and the nice waitress, a child's black and white framing of a complex adult world. "The mean lady only saw my braces," she would say to audiences of powerful executives and philanthropists, "but Chloe saw me. It's better to see the person." Her words, in their unadorned simplicity, were more impactful than any polished corporate presentation. She had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of the matter. Amelia watched her daughter blossom, her heart filled with a fierce, protective pride. She had built a global empire, but her greatest legacy, she knew, would be the values she instilled in her child. She was raising a leader who would lead not with intimidation, but with empathy, a leader who understood that true strength lay in one's capacity for compassion. The Blackwood family's life did not change externally. They still lived in the same relatively modest home. Amelia still wore her comfortable cardigans and jeans. They still valued substance over style, but internally, something had shifted. The incident had reaffirmed their core mission, reminding them why they had sought wealth and influence in the first place. Not for its own sake, but for the good it could do in the world. They became even more dedicated to their philanthropic work, pouring billions into programs that promoted education, social justice, and inclusivity. Mr. Abernathy, after a lengthy suspension and intensive retraining through the Chloe program, was eventually reinstated, not as the manager of a flagship restaurant, but in a lesser role at a more modest establishment within the Blackwood portfolio. He was a changed man. The arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by a quiet humility. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined not to waste it. He became one of the most ardent supporters of the new training protocols, his own story a powerful, if cautionary tale for new recruits. He had learned, the hard way, that leadership was not about commanding respect, but about earning it. He had learned that every person who walked through the door, regardless of their appearance, was a human being deserving of dignity. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The ripple effect of that single afternoon continued to expand, touching lives in ways Amelia could never have anticipated. It was a powerful demonstration of the domino effect of a single choice, a single action. The choice to be cruel versus the choice to be kind. The narrative of that day became a cornerstone of the Blackwood Corporation's identity. Amelia mandated that the story be told to every new employee, from the janitorial staff to the senior vice presidents. It was not just a story about customer service, it was a parable about the company's soul. It served as a constant reminder that their work was not just about profit margins and shareholder value, but about their impact on the world. The story emphasized that every employee, at every level, was a representative of the Blackwood brand and its core values. It was a powerful tool for building a cohesive and ethical corporate culture. The tale took on a life of its own, becoming something of a legend within the business world. Competitors who had once scoffed at Amelia's soft approach began to see the strategic genius behind it. They saw that in an increasingly transparent world, a company's reputation for kindness and integrity was its most valuable asset. The Blackwood Way became a case study in business schools, analyzed for its brilliant fusion of compassionate capitalism and public relations. But for Amelia, it was never about PR. It was about creating a world where her daughter, and every child like her, would be judged not by their physical challenges or their external appearance, but by the content of their character. This mission fueled her with an inexhaustible energy. She became a global advocate for disability rights, using her platform to lobby for greater accessibility and inclusion in all facets of life. She funded research into new assistive technologies, working to break down the physical barriers that prevented so many from reaching their full potential. Lily was her constant inspiration, her guiding star. As Lily grew into a young woman, she became an active partner in her mother's work. She possessed her mother's quiet strength and her father's warm charisma. She had a unique ability to connect with people, to make them feel seen and heard. She chose not to go into the family's technology business, but to dedicate her life to the foundation. She took over the leadership of the Chloe program, expanding its reach and impact far beyond what anyone had imagined. Her personal story gave her an authenticity that was impossible to replicate. She was not just a wealthy philanthropist. She was a living testament to the very principles she was advocating. The Gilded Spoon, under Chloe's continued leadership, earned its third Michelin star, a rare and coveted honor. The award was a vindication not just of its culinary excellence, but of its philosophy. The Michelin Guide, in its review, noted not only the exquisite food but also the unprecedented atmosphere of warmth and inclusivity. It praised the restaurant for redefining the very meaning of fine dining. Chloe, upon accepting the award, did not give a long speech about her own accomplishments. Instead, she told a story about a woman, a child, and a simple glass of water. It was a story about how the smallest gesture of kindness could lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. She dedicated the award to Amelia and Lily Blackwood, and to every service professional who chose compassion over judgment. The arc of redemption for Celeste was long and arduous. For months, she toiled in the anonymity of the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. The physical labor was grueling, but the emotional and psychological toll was far greater. She was forced to confront the person she had been, arrogant, judgmental, and cruel. There were days she wanted to quit, to run away and escape the shame that clung to her like the smell of grease. But something made her stay. It was the quiet dignity of the other kitchen staff, many of them immigrants and working-class people she would have once looked down upon. They did not mock her or treat her with contempt. They simply treated her as one of their own, sharing their food, their stories, and their laughter. For the first time in her life, she was part of a community based not on status, but on shared hard work and mutual respect. She began to listen more than she spoke. She learned about their struggles, their hopes, their families. She started to see them not as cogs in a machine, but as human beings, each with their own rich and complex lives. It was a slow and painful process, a shedding of a skin that had been her armor for years. One day, Chloe found her crying quietly in the dry storage room during a break. Chloe didn't say anything. She just sat down next to her and handed her a bottle of water. It was a simple echo of the gesture that had started it all. In that moment, Celeste finally broke. The apology she offered was not the desperate, self-serving plea of the day she was fired. It was a genuine, soul-deep expression of remorse. "I was a terrible person," she sobbed. "I don't know why you gave me a second chance." Chloe looked at her, her expression one of profound empathy. "Because my mentors, the Blackwoods, taught me that everyone deserves a second chance," she said softly. "They believe that people can change, and I believe it too." From that day forward, Celeste's transformation accelerated. She began to take pride in her work, ensuring the dishes were spotless, the kitchen organized. She started to look out for her colleagues, advocating for them when she saw an injustice. She was still a kitchen porter, but she was no longer defined by her job title. She was defined by her actions. Eventually, after more than 2 years, a position opened up for a junior kitchen manager. Chloe, seeing the profound change in Celeste, encouraged her to apply. The old Celeste would have felt the job was beneath her. The new Celeste saw it as an opportunity, a chance to serve the community she had grown to love. She got the job. The story of Celeste's fall and rise became another integral part of the restaurant's legend, a testament to the power of redemption. It showed that the culture of kindness extended not just to the guests, but to the staff as well. It was a place where mistakes were not fatal, where people were not disposable, and where true character could be forged in the crucible of humility. Years passed. The Gilded Spoon became an institution, a name synonymous not just with luxury, but with integrity. Chloe became one of the most respected figures in the global hospitality industry, a sought-after speaker and consultant. She never married, instead dedicating her life to her work and to mentoring the next generation of leaders, always guided by the principles the Blackwoods had instilled in her. She remained a close friend of the Blackwood family, a beloved aunt to Lily's own children. Amelia and her husband eventually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of their empire, dedicating their golden years entirely to their foundation. Their work had changed the landscape of corporate responsibility, proving that a business could be both wildly profitable and a powerful force for good. Their legacy was not in the stock price of their company, but in the countless lives that had been touched by their philosophy of compassionate capitalism. Lily, as the head of the foundation, carried the torch forward. She was a visionary leader, expanding their work into new areas, tackling some of the world's most pressing social problems. Her own experiences gave her a unique and powerful voice, one that resonated with both the powerful and the powerless. And what of the restaurant itself, the stage upon which this drama had unfolded? One crisp autumn evening, an elderly Amelia and a grown Lily, now with a daughter of her own who walked without the aid of braces, visited the Gilded Spoon. They were, as always, dressed simply. Chloe, her hair now streaked with silver, greeted them at the door with a warm embrace. They sat at their usual corner table, observing the quiet, seamless dance of service. They saw a young, nervous waiter drop a tray of glasses. The sound shattered the quiet ambiance. The old Mr. Abernathy would have fired him on the spot. But the new manager, a man who had come up through the Chloe program, rushed to the young man's side, not with anger, but with concern. He helped him clean up the mess, patted him on the back, and whispered a few words of encouragement. The patrons didn't complain or stare. A few even offered sympathetic smiles. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. It was the culmination of everything they had worked for. It was a culture of kindness, fully and beautifully realized. Amelia looked at Lily, her eyes shining with tears of pride and joy. The ghost of a painful memory had been replaced by a living, breathing legacy of warmth and acceptance. The lesson had been taught, the change had been made, and the world, in this one small corner at least, was a better place. The moral of the story was etched not on a plaque on the wall, but in the heart of every person who entered the Gilded Spoon. It was a simple, timeless truth that true worth is not measured by what you have, but by how you treat others. It is found not in expensive suits and polished marble, but in a simple glass of water offered with a kind and open heart. The story of that single day serves as a powerful reminder that our perceptions are often flawed, colored by the superficial markers we have been taught to value. Amelia and Lily walked into that restaurant not as a millionaire and her daughter, but as a test of character for everyone they encountered. Celeste, the waitress, saw only a threat to the exclusive world she so desperately wanted to be a part of. She saw a simple cardigan and worn shoes, and in her mind they were symbols of unworthiness. Her judgment was swift, her cruelty a defense mechanism to protect her own fragile sense of belonging. Mr. Abernathy, the manager, saw a disruption to his carefully curated order. He saw a problem to be removed, not a person to be understood. His prejudice was more polished, more professional, but no less damaging. He failed the test because his priorities were misplaced. He valued the appearance of decorum over the practice of decency. In stark contrast, there was Chloe. In a room full of people who saw only what was on the surface, she saw something more. She saw a mother's love, a child's innocence, and a fellow